Like a lot of idiots, I moved to New York to be an actor. And when someone says they moved to New York to be an actor, what they are actually saying is they have moved to New York to work a series of brutal, low-paying jobs to barely make rent, which is what I did. And one of the brutal, low-paying jobs that I got was I was a mover. And being a mover in New York City basically means you're like a middle guy on a 5-floor walk-up. You are in an unair-conditioned, unventilated stairwell. It's 105 degrees outside and 110 degrees in that stairwell because everyone moves in the summertime, and you are hiking up and down 3 flights of stairs with like 60-pound boxes and sweating out all the moisture in your body and coming this close to death, right? And this is what I did. And I kind of loved it because it was very physical, and I got to go all over the city, and I was new to the city, and I hadn't been that long. And also, I got to meet a lot of people, and I wasn't meeting a lot of people. I was just meeting people who rejected me because I was going on auditions, and they're like, you go into a room, no one talks to you, you talk to them, and they go home, and that's how that goes. So this is actually, I got to have conversations with human beings, and that was nice. But also, the other thing about being a mover in New York is that if you can show up on time and relatively sober to a moving job, you will never climb a company ladder faster, right? Because it is so rare in the field. And so very quickly, I was made a foreman with my own crew. And at the company that I worked for, when they made you a foreman, they brought you down to the office to have a little talk. And the little talk went like this. They brought you into this room, and they were like, all right, look, psychologists have found that moving is the third most traumatic thing that every adult will have to do routinely in their lifetime. The first is the death of a loved one. The second is the breakup of a relationship. And the third is moving. Because when you move, what happens is that you pack up all of your worldly possessions into boxes, and then total strangers show up and manhandle your life out the front door of your native habitat. And for any mammal, this is a scarring experience, right? Even when it's a positive move, a move for good reasons, people, it's still it fucks you up, right? And so the moral of this story was, handle the client with care. As the foreman, that's your job. Treat the client gingerly because they're in an emotionally raw place. Right? Got it. And so with that in my back pocket, I went out to foreman my own moves. And the thing is, I really kind of there was something about this idea that really appealed to me. I don't know why. Being the first point of contact for someone that was hanging on by a thread, I kind of, that had some weird appeal. And I found myself always I'd go into any work situation, and I'd find myself kind of watching the client out of the corner of my eye, waiting for that single tear that would be the clue that we'd reached the breaking point, and they were just going to end up huddling in a corner, bawling, and I was going to be talking them off a ledge. And I don't know why I wanted to do this, but it had some kind of sadistic appeal for me, apparently. Because I was always sort of waiting for that, and it never happened. Because basically the social contract abides. People are fine. You'd show up, and people would they'd be a little agitated, a little bit on edge, but they'd keep their shit together, and everything was all right. But then one day, I get a work order moving a guy from the Village to Williamsburg. All right, so I show up, I get there, my guys show up, the van shows up, everybody piles out, I ring the buzzer, the guy buzzes us in, we head up to the 3rd floor, we get up there, the door to the apartment is already hanging open, waiting for us when we get there. And I go up to the door, and I just sort of push the door the rest of the way open, and I call, hey, your movers are here, and no response, and it is immediately obvious, just looking in the door, that we are on the bad side of a breakup. Because there is virtually no large furniture, only 3 pieces in there. There is 2 backpacks full of clothes and some 60-pound boxes of books and records, and everything else is in black garbage bags. And you sort of scan past all of that, and you come to the client. And the client is just, he looks like He's just the saddest hipster in the world. He looks like he's hung by a hook. He's like drooping, like gravity is dragging him to the floor. And he's gray and he's ashen, and he barely makes any kind of sound of acknowledgement when I ask if he's the person we're looking for. And like it's more like he is haunting the place than living in it, right? And I see this guy and I'm like, this is the guy. Like, this is the guy. He's the one I've been waiting for, right? And I'm like, oh shit, okay, so I've got to like handle this. Because the other thing is like, when a client's in an emotionally fucked up place, when they're like agitated or when they're high stress, it affects the movers. Like, that's when like really expensive shit gets broken, because these guys, like the movers are all like really stoned, and you watching them makes them paranoid and clumsy, and so then they like drop your TV, and so then you're watching them more, and they're getting more paranoid and clumsy, and then they're like dropping real shit, right? And so like, don't watch the movers. Leave them the fuck alone. If you want your stuff to get to the other place intact, do not watch the fucking movers. Leave them alone, because you're just fucking up the stoners, okay? That's all you're doing. So I like looking at this guy, and I'm like, okay, so I've got to like handle the situation. So I give my guys their jobs, and like, you could grab this and grab that and grab the other thing and take it all down. And so now my job is to wrap the large furniture and make small talk with the client to make him comfortable, right? That's the job. So I go and I throw a blanket over the table, and I'm taping this blanket down, and I'm trying to figure out something to say to this guy. He's just looming behind me like the sad angel of death. And I've got to say something to him, and so I immediately say the wrong thing. And I say, so, are you gonna miss the neighborhood? At which point he says, no. My girlfriend wanted to live here. And that's over. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And so now I've just made it worse. And I'm like, I've got to say something. I've got to fill this void and say something to make this better. So I just start saying like whatever comes into my head. It's the first thing that comes to my head is like, yeah, you know, when I first moved to New York, I moved here with a girl. She was going to Columbia Law. And so we moved up around Columbia, like to like housing in like, Columbia. And I ended up living up there around Columbia. Like I didn't really fit in up there because it was all college kids and college bars. And I wasn't going to college, and her law school friends. This wasn't a good fit. And so like eventually after the first year, like we broke up. And then I moved to Brooklyn. When I moved to Brooklyn, I really kind of found my place, you know? I kind of found my spot. I found my bar, my roommate was great, and there's like a lot of restaurants, a place I want to hang out in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn, like New York started to feel like a home when I got to Brooklyn. I kind of found my place in Brooklyn. Silence. Just the sound of the tape coming off the roll. And then finally, this tiny voice behind me says, so it gets better? And I said, yeah, man. Yeah, it does. This changed everything. Suddenly this guy's like, he cannot wait to get out of this apartment. He's like, let's go. And he's like wanting to like help us carry things down to the van, which he's paying us to do. But he's like, we got to get out of here right now. And he's like getting us down to the van. We're like loading stuff into the truck, and he wants to ride in the truck over to Williamsburg. And we let him. We like put him in the middle seat, and he like rides in the truck, like just sort of leaned forward like a Labrador, just staring at the windshield. And we get him like over the bridge and into Williamsburg, and he can't wait to get into the apartment. We get into the apartment. He's showing us like every little detail of the place, and he's talking about all the bars and record stores and the restaurants he's going to go to, and he's like, I can't wait to talk about it. He's like, giving my guys snacks and beer, including the guy who drove the van, which I have qualms about, but fuck it, you know, we're here. And he's like, and when we go to leave, he tips all of my guys, gives them all a huge tip, and then he like goes out and he's waving to us as we are driving away, and like off into the distance, and you know, we waved and we were gone into the night. And that was a very, very long time ago. But I still, like every once in a while, now years and years later, when I've left the moving job behind, and I'm instead running a burlesque show, a much more sober profession. I don't know what I'm talking about. But you know, now every once in a while I'll be back in Williamsburg, and I'll end up back on 9th Street, I think it was. And I will pass by that neighborhood, and I'll pass by where we dropped off the Hipster. And I often look back at those jobs that I had when I first got to New York, and I think of them as meaningless and brutal jobs that, meant nothing. But then I walk down that guy's street and I think to myself, can you really call any job meaningless if it helps you save one hipster? Thank you. That was my story.
Thank you, Brad Lawrence.